just I think we're live now. So, um, my name is Stanley, and I'm here to be taking you through APIs. And yeah, it's quite interesting session to be honest. And I looked at the LinkedIn post and saw a lot of comments and questions about APIs and how scary it can be. So I guess one thing I'm going to say is APIs can be scary at first, but it takes a lot of practice, as you say, to obviously get used to the structure and layout of API documentation and even further working with APIs. So I'm gonna I think my screen is shared, so I'll share that now.
Yes, I'm gonna put it on the screen onto the main screen in a minute. So thank you so
Right.
much, Stanley, for being so proactive and just, giving yourself an introduction. I was just gonna introduce you to all the audience here. So, happy Thursday and
Yeah.
welcome to our Nocoder live community show. As per usual, we're here gathered not only with our members from our community, but our wider audience. And this month in particular, we've been focusing about on APIs, which is a really important and hot topic among our community. And I'm here joined today by Stan, our guest speaker, and my handsome assistant Jens here, who will be helping me out with the direction of the event and also keeping you up to date with the news coming up at NoCodeOps. Jens, do you want to tell us a couple things before we kick off our event today?
I would love to. Thank you for having me again. So yeah, this is our third event, and I'm really looking forward to this. We actually have 2 more or 3 more lined up. So if you've signed up for this event, you will most certainly get an email about that in the near future. If you sign up for our newsletter, you will get information about that as well. If you aren't signed up for our newsletter, you can go to nocodeops.com and you find it. That way you will have all the information in the future. And I will give the mic back to you. And in a while, after Stan's presentation, I want to share a few things about our upcoming boot camp about APIs.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jens. I'm just going to get you out of the way. Thank you so much, Jens. And yes, so Stan, today we will be talking about documentation, right, in terms of APIs. So far, during our past events, like Jens was saying, we've, explored what an API is, how to use them, how to create your own backend using Xano. So thank you, Chris Coleman, our first guest speaker. And so today with you, we will be just exploring documentation, why it's important to have documentation on APIs. So yeah, over to you then. I'm just going to pop your screen. There you go.
Fantastic. So yeah, once again, thanks for having me. Really excited to I would say demystify API documentation. And I watched the first 2 videos about APIs that Chris did, and I must say it was a really great job, to be honest. Yeah, Chris, I think broke it down into a very simple format, especially with Xano. A lot of people struggle with Xano, so I'll say great man, Chris. Looking forward to meeting you. So without further ado, I'm just going to crack on and move towards today's event. And so we're going to be walking through API documentation, and I'll be introducing you to a tool called Postman, which in my opinion is one of the best friends for every developer to have, to be honest. And at first it could be intimidating, but as you progress, you obviously get used to the structure of the system. So you need to move on to the next slide, please. Oh, there we
That's
go.
it.
Brill. All right. So first of all, who is Stanley? Who's Stanley? So I am what I tend to call myself citizens developer. What that simply means is in my respective workplace, I find problems and I try to use no-code solutions to solve those problems. So that means I am representing the no-code thinking and way of thinking in my respective organization. And I work as an energy professional, so in the UK energy sector, just managing policies. So my day job, writing policies and progressing changes to like the UK industry. But you might be asking, how come? Why are you dealing with APIs? I think it's quite interesting. In my journey as a Nocoder developer, I've come across a lot of tools and building APIs. So I'll explain that much later. I'm a Man United supporter, so if you're out there, yeah, you're doing good. I'm happy right now with the way we're performing. And whenever I'm stressed, I like to throw arcs. So there's a arcs throwing center next to me. So I just go there and just throw arcs and just distress. I work with Bubble, and that's my favorite tool. I tried to delve into Webflow, but for some reason I just gave up. So hopefully I can pick it up again. And I think Claudia mentioned there's a potential event coming soon. So looking forward to that as well. I hate mundane tasks. I hate boring tasks. So I tend to automate them with Zapier and Make, which was formerly called Integromat. And Notion is my second brain. Every single thing is documented there. So those are my big, nice one, Brett. Those are my big tools out there. So that's about me. So really lovely to be here and to meet you guys today. So by the end of today, and if I've done a good job, hopefully Claudia will tell me, I'm hoping to give you this value. So I'm hoping to run through the recap of what API means. So for the benefits of people who are attending this session for the first time and are hearing about APIs for the first time, and also just to remind people who've been to the first two sessions where we talked about APIs, this is going to be a high-level summary of what APIs are. And then I'll take you through navigating a documentation. So they will walk through 3 services that are very popular. I'm sure one of you've interacted with one of those services. So we're going to be talking about the structure of their documentation, what I like about the documentation, what classes as a good API documentation. And then I'll be taking you over to Postman, where I'll walk you through a high-level aspect of Postman, because I'm not going to confuse you tonight. That's not my aim tonight. And then I will, together, we'll build an API, a very simple API, and you see how powerful this can actually be. And that would obviously, hopefully, spark some thoughts in your mind on what you can actually do. And you go out there and be API evangelist. I trust you guys.
And some inspiration as well. You got me really intrigued when you told me Postman. Basically, Claudia, think of Postman as a Figma, but for developers. And I was like, okay, I understand that. I like that. Yeah,
exactly.
So.
Exactly. So that's it. Figma for developers, where you just map everything before taking it to your service. But we'll talk about that shortly. So recap of APIs. You see that handsome waiter over there. People tend to use the analogy APIs are like your waiters. I agree with that. It's very, very simple, and is I think the most relatable analogy I can say in explaining APIs. So you walk into a restaurant, right? You're the person, you walk into a restaurant. You obviously are going to a restaurant to have food. The first thing you're going to do is to ask for the menu. So that is what we call a GET request. So you're requesting information from the restaurant's waiter. Now the waiter is your API. So he goes, gets the menu for you. You browse the menu. You love what you see. It's time to make an order. So this is when you're posting, which is another method of API, a request to the endpoint service infrastructure. In this case, is a kitchen. So you send your request, you want your burger medium rare, you want some fries, you want this and that. So that is you customizing what your API is going to bring back to you. So the waiter, who's the API, will then go to the service. The chef will then look at the waiter and decide whether or not this waiter works here. So that's a way of authenticating what the waiter is bringing to the kitchen itself. And if by confirming that the waiter works, the chef makes the food, passes back to the waiter brings you food, you eat, you're all good. Everyone is happy. You leave a 5-star review if you like the food, though.
People in the chat are saying love that the waiter analogy is back. Big fan of Bubble. So we're all big foodies here at Nocoder.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm a foodie myself as well. So the APIs enable two-way communications between two services. It's commonly used in web development and app development as well. Oh, yeah, full screen.
Yeah.
Apologies for that.
No worries.
There we go.
Awesome. Yeah.
Can you see that?
Perfect.
Bro. So as I was saying, commonly used in web development and app development. And the first step of using the API is to provide the correct password, which is what I was talking about, the authentication. So as long as you can provide the right token to the endpoint service, you can get the data and information that you seek. So in a short while, we're going to be walking through some services and their API documentation. But to me, what classes as a good API documentation is one, from the technical side of things. An API documentation would usually have an introduction section. So this is the service telling you what you can expect to get from the API itself, giving you some information about how you should use the API. Also, they could explain what sort of rate limit you'd have. So what that simply means is how many API calls can you make at every given time. A good API documentation is clear and concise. So they have instruction on how to authenticate their calls, which is the most important thing whenever you're setting up your APIs. Errors is a big thing. So you're bound to make errors. So everyone is perfect, but a good API documentation would explain the errors correctly and walk you through how to troubleshoot those errors. They usually have status code, so you can immediately pick this up and match it with the library and find out what the issue is. Again, like I said, they will explain how much usage you can have and the limit rates, so you know how to manage your calls going forward. In terms of UI elements, so a good API documentation has a great navigation journey. And I'm just going to step the gun here and say one of my favorite API documentation is Airtable. I don't think I've seen anyone who can beat Airtable, to be honest. And I'm going to tell you shortly why. And then it's always kept up to date because you're not going to be offering people all the information. That's just bad user experience. So those are, in my view, from a higher level perspective, what a good API documentation consists of.
Shout out to our friends at Airtable. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's super important to have, that clear documentation also in terms of, speed of development, right? Because, it's so important to have a clear documentation so that you don't run into those errors, or if you do, you can troubleshoot them straight away. And so, yeah, that's a good sign of a good API documentation for sure.
Yeah, you agree with that. So these are some of the services that I have actually worked with in the past, and I'm sure you've heard about one of these, or if not three. So I'm going to take you through to Airtable. Oh, just escape that for now. Copy and paste. There we go. So you land on Airtable. I hope this is coming along nicely. Can you see this clearly?
Yeah, 100%.
So you appear on Airtable's website, and you are, for the first time, trying to figure out where can I find the APIs. Usually, this websites have their APIs in a designated developer section under resources. I mean, different websites have different terminologies, I would say, but most times they use resources as an API section to place the API documentation itself. So you can clearly see here under develop, you have API docs. Another neat trick to find an API documentation is just to scroll right to the bottom in the footer. Usually they'll place it here and you can kind of find out where they're placed. So for example, I'm just going to say, 1 second. Oh, there we go.
They've hidden their APIs because they knew that we were gonna have a talk about it, and so
it's actually here. So usually you have it there. They try to play a trick on me, Airtable. Come on, I told you guys are the best, and now you try to play a trick on me. So right at the bottom here, you have the APIs, but I was expecting to see it here under one of the brackets here. So for example, on the resource or learn more, you'd have the API documentation. But in summary, you can find the API documentation in the resource. They usually provide it as a resource itself, or it could be clearly called out in the website itself. So I'm just going to click API, and that takes you to the Airtable API developer section. So here you just immediately presented with the API tree. So this is the documentation tree. So I'm going to minimize everything so you can see how it's branched out. So like I was saying, good API documentation will have the introduction section. So here you just a quick overview of what the API kind of offers you, the services it offer you. And in some cases, they'll spell out the languages. So now this is getting too technical, so I'm not going to spend any time on that because I do not want to confuse you. So they will obviously spell out the languages they offer the APIs via. So you've got JavaScript and you've got Ruby, .NET, Python, which are different coding languages, I would say. And moving on to the authentication, which is how to actually connect with the API services. Airtable would obviously advise you what to do. So here you can immediately see what sort of information you need to provide Airtable to successfully connect with their services. In this, I think is a
We have, yes, David Gatlin from LinkedIn. Hi, David. He's saying when you're logged into the Airtable, you have a link to the API documentation under your profile. That's a good tip. So if you can't find it straight away on the website, you can also find it when you're logged in onto Airtable directly.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks for that, David. That's a good tip, to be honest. And I think I can actually show that now. So, for example, I'm just going to continue and then I will take you to the profile itself and show you exactly what David was talking about. So thanks for that. So you have your authentication information. This is essentially telling you how to connect with the third-party application itself. Scopes, this defines what sorts of calls and interactions you can make, what sort of changes you can make via the API. So it's scoping basically what you can do with the APIs. And then you got auth references. Again, this is kind of like an expanded version of the token permissions and the information you need to be aware of in terms of authorizing your call between your service and Airtable service. Errors. So errors, again, like I was saying, they clearly spell out what the errors could be from your API calls. These are the status codes. So these would usually come back in the response when you ping a call, which I'll show you shortly. And it obviously categorizes this based on what is successful, what is an error, and in each error, it tells you exactly what the root cause could be. And that will obviously trigger your resolution process. So what can I do to actually solve this? And then it breaks it down into like server codes, user error codes, which are like user generated errors. And then just giving you an example of what the errors could look like. So if you see it, you can easily relate with that error and try and fix it. Rate limits, as I previously said, so it tells you how much limit you are, well, how much rate you're limited to. And change log. So this is what I was talking about, keeping things up to date. So a good API documentation would have a change log telling you all of the changes they've made, when they made them, and what changes basically went into that change release. That way, you know that if you're interacting with an old version of the API, you need to update it. But usually, the API service would automatically update this.
Mm-hmm. And just to remind the people that have joined us, maybe just now, we're just walking you through a good example of, a good piece of API documentation. Right now, we're showcasing the API documentation from Airtable. And so we were just saying, just at the beginning, how important it is to have it having it nicely laid out, like this one that we're looking at right now, just in terms of like preventing errors, or if there are any errors, like facilitating troubleshooting, and so also improving performance and development speeds.
Yep. Good summary there. And then yeah, you got your different products. So each service has its own product and what they offer. So if you're familiar with Airtable, you know that a base is a kind of like a location where you can store multiple tables. Think of a base as like an Excel a worksheet where you can have multiple tabs in each worksheet. So that's just a simplified version of what Airtable represents. So it just tells you what you can actually do. You can retrieve records from your Airtable database, the fields, comments, and tables, and all sorts of things that you can do with the Airtable API. So just going back to David's point, so if you also wanted to access the API documentation from within your application, assuming you're logged into Airtable, all you need to do is just, I'm going to go back to the homepage. There we go. So this, I'm automatically logged in, but for you, you would need to obviously register your account, follow the registration process. It's quick and easy. And then here I've got like two bases. So I'm just going to click the first one. This is just a sample base I was testing around with. So from here, you can access your API documentation by just going to your account. So you got your keys. So your keys is very important to be aware of as well. So if you have your Airtable account, you need your keys to be able to authenticate your calls, okay? So if you're gonna get to the Airtable APIs, you just go here. This is your personal API key. It's required to be used in the Airtable API, and that takes you back to where we've just visited. So it's a longer route, but it just, what the difference here is, when you're logged in and you visit the Airtable API, it dynamically shows you your record IDs. So you don't have to actually ping anything in there. So you don't have to actually fill anything in the fields itself as a parameter. So it dynamically matches everything that you have stored in your base. That's the beauty of Airtable API as well, which is what I love about it, I would say. So going back to the second bit, so I'm just going to show you Shopify as well, which is another another API that I like as well.
Would you say that's kind of like best practices when you're looking for an API, or when do you look for an API? Give me that kind of use case, right? I'm a developer, or maybe I'm a wannabe no-code developer like myself. When do I look? When do I search for an API? What do I want to do?
So yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, like you said, is the use case. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. I think ideally and like ultimately, what you're seeking to do with APIs is to automatically do something. So if you're going to do something on a regular basis, so you obviously need an API. I mean, if I take this to like the Zapier award, so Zapier is just like an abstract layer of APIs in the sense that it provides you an interface to interact with, and you think you're automating things yourself. But essentially, it's APIs calling information between the two services. So if you need to do something on I'll say scalable, like if you need to scale and you need to do something consistently, you're repeating different processes, and also you need to get a large like list of records and all that. So you would obviously need APIs, but it ultimately boils down to your use case, like what do you need to do, and most cases the advice if you need APIs or not.
And so Zapier is like, the visual interface of an API basically, which is wonderful because I'm a very visual person. So
yeah,
great job, Zapier.
Yeah, you're building workflow automations, but it's essentially APIs because you're getting information from the third party service, but you can only get that information via APIs. You can't get it any other way. The only other way would be like manually, but of course you wouldn't want to do that as a business.
Right.
David mentioned something about Developer Hub.
Yes.
I think he was referring to another section of Airtable. Oh, 1 second. So I think, David, it's kind of like the same thing, to be honest. I think it's just different wording and just different links, I would say, but it takes you to essentially the same place. So I just wanted to just call that out just in case that was a question.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. So I will then take you through Shopify's API, and hopefully we can then delve into building an actual API.
Nice.
So you can see how things work. So again, as you can see, resources, here they would usually place it on their resources, but it's down to the business and how they want to structure their APIs, where they're located, right?
And
here you see on the
I think you froze for a second there, but you're back. Yeah, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's probably the network. So if I don't see it at the top there, I usually go to the bottom, as I previously mentioned. And here you can see it's clearly called out under developers and API documentation. So what I'm trying to say here is any service that offers API will definitely show you where to find that information on their webpage. However, they might potentially be called different things. They might have different terminologies for naming the API documentation, and they might have different ways of categorizing the API. So quick tip for me is just go to the bottom of the page. You might have to do some digging around, but it's essentially there at the bottom of the page. You see the API documentation in there. Again, so this is Shopify dark mode, which is nice. So API reference is essentially the same word as an introduction. So just walking you through the overview of the API itself, the service, and what you can expect to get from the service. Here you can see that Shopify offers APIs for the different products within their ecosystem. So if you're interested in partner API, you can go here and it takes you to the partner API, which uses GraphQL. I know I mentioned GraphQL, which is a different type of API, and that's for a later session anyways. And if you go back, if you click storefront API, for example, you're an e-commerce business and you want to manage some of your high-level processes via APIs, you can easily just go to the storefront, managing interactions with your store itself. So such as checkouts, seeing your list of customers, so you can send queries and find that information. And as you can clearly see, it follows the same structure. So you have authentication, tells you how to authenticate, which is the most important thing that you need to set up first before you actually start to play around with the APIs. Because without the authentication, you can't actually interact with the APIs itself. And same structure, rate limits, status, and error codes. So as you progress, as you play around with API documentation, I think you develop an eye for the type of layout and structure that each API documentation follows. But just noting that they might have different terminologies, but it's essentially the same layout. So you pick that up as you practice more and more with the API documentation.
And that's something I want to ask as well, like to our audience, whether you're watching us on YouTube or LinkedIn, we can read your questions. So if you've ever tried using APIs, or if you're thinking on using them, just, if there's anything you would like to know about them, feel free to drop a question in the chat and we'll read it out for you and answer it now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that, Claudia. So yeah, I hope everyone is following along. So yeah, exciting stuff. So right now we're going to move towards the session of actually building our first APIs, but I'll be taking you through Postman. So just sit back, relax, and just enjoy this. So I'm going to close this off now. So introduction to Postman. So before I take you to the actual system itself, I like to call Postman an API developer's best close buddy. So it is my best friend because, like I said, with the analogy in the beginning, Postman is kind of like a Figma for designers, but in this case, it's a developer's Figma. In the sense that when you want to design an app itself, whether be it in Webflow, in Bubble, or whatever web building application that you use, I think the best practice requires that you design or you mock up your design so you can actually follow something that's consistent. So apply that same principles to building APIs. So Postman is a tool that allows you to construct the APIs, test the APIs, debug the API, find out the errors, and then provides a framework for you to replicate that same setup in your endpoint service. So it just helps you and walks you through the process of setting up an API. There's some very nice features that Postman offers. It depends on your level of using the tool. Most businesses use Postman, for example, to manage their test cases. So I imagine having a developer team itself, you have you're about to release a new feature for your application. You'd have a list of tests that you need to run through, and those tests might be linked to APIs itself. So Postman offers an ecosystem where you can manage your test cases, and it's just an automated way of running test cases. Another beauty is it supports internal and external collaboration, so you can collaborate with people within your company and outside your company. To be honest, you can share APIs and you can work on it together, make changes, design the correct APIs, and you can publish it out there to the marketplace. So in terms of walking through Postman, I'll show you the environment itself, and then we're going to be using one of my favorite marketplace API. So it's kind of like a rich library of any API that you want. You can basically run an API to see a list of cocktails. Like we're going to be doing that this evening, because why not? It's Thursday evening, you can have a cocktail.
Of course, Thursday is the new Friday. Everyone knows that.
Fantastic. So I'm going to minimize this and head over to Postman. So to visit Postman, you can visit either the website's version. They can also, you can also download the app itself to your system or your environment. So I think it might be easier for you if you have space in your laptop, you can download this as an app within your laptop. That way you don't have to go to the website every time you need to access Postman. I think for me personally, I just like to go to the website version and I just access Postman from there. So when you land in Postman, this is the home page. So I like my dark mode. Dark mode helps me out a lot. As you can clearly see, it's just very, very polite. Good evening, Stanley. That's the first thing. So brownie points to Postman. And you can just see an overview of some of the sections within Postman itself. So here you can see API governance. So for example, if you create governance around how you manage your APIs within an organization, this is where you can store it. We'll go back here. Then you've got things like security, integrations, reports, which is great. So you can track how your APIs are performing, which is great. And then you've got like a marketplace of APIs itself. So you have a rich library of APIs from different services. So far, is there any recommendation aside this webinar's leading APIs and usage? Thanks.
Yeah,
So sure.
well, besides this, Habib, besides these free webinars that we do every Thursday, we're also launching an API bootcamp to become an API expert in 3 weeks. So the link is coming along towards the end of our talk today. But if you're interested, shoot me a DM or I'll make sure I'll get it to you.
Fantastic. Great stuff. So Postman, again, gives you access to loads of things you can access. So you can access predefined templates from big applications out there, such as PayPal. You've got like DocuSign as well. So you can basically go in there. In the developer world, they call it fork. So this simply means you're copying the API setup itself, and you're basically saving it in your environment. So you can take a copy of this and save it in your environment to be used. As you can clearly see, a lot of people have actually forked this, and people watching this API, so if there's any updates, they get this updates. So to build an API, which is the exciting part of this webinar, I must say, you just head over to a workspace. So a workspace is kind of like an environment where you would store every single thing related to the governance, the APIs, how you've categorized them, even your teams. So you can invite your teams, you can manage your teams in there. You can track things like the error rates. You can track things like your reports in there. So I'm going to head over to Nocoder Ops. So this is the one I created before this session. In here, you can see it gives you another view of the Postman environment. So it's followed a different branch. So here you can have collections. So think of collections as just folders, basically. For example, if you create an API to retrieve records on vehicle data, you can create a collection and name it vehicle data APIs. So this is how you can organize your APIs and just structure them in a very clean format. And then APIs, this is where you obviously create your APIs, and they're all listed there depending on how many you create. Environment, so you can determine whether you're going to have different environments within Postman. So I know some organizations usually have sandbox and production environments. So sandbox would be where you're testing the APIs, and the production would be when you're ready to launch your APIs, make it public out there. Mock servers, so this basically allows you to simulate like a back end type of thing, so you can interact with multiple APIs as if you are the back end service. So going back to my kitchen analogy, so you can basically act as the kitchen itself, and you're pinging information to the kitchen and getting that information, the response back.
And Stanley, you've come to this from a no-coder kind of perspective, or did you know it before? Like, did you do a little bit of development? Is it something that no coders can easily approach and utilize?
So the first question, I came to this as a no coder. I am very, very shit at coding. I have never coded. Well, I have coded, but I just didn't like it. I think I coded just to create a solution out of frustration, but I didn't like it. I wasn't passionate about it. So all of this, I think, has just come with practice. Seeing people raise questions about APIs, I go in there, tinker, try and find out, okay, how can I solve this?
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, I came across Postman. And at first, I was like, what's Postman? What am I going to use this for? But as time went on, I found the value in Postman, and seeing organizations work with Postman, I obviously became aware of why they're using Postman, and therefore it just became natural, I'd say.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's very valuable to a lot of no coders out there that are trying to get a little bit more technical. Because when once you get into no code, it's amazing. You start developing your first apps, or whatever you're trying to do, your first websites, and then you always want to do, okay, what's one step further? How can I go deeper? And then that's how APIs came into my kind of interest as well. Like, okay, let's get a little bit more technical now. What can we do with these APIs? Yeah.
That's I think that's a good summary. So essentially, if you're looking to extend the capability of your application via APIs, that's the best way to go about things, because nowadays you need more than one application to deliver value to end consumers, I would say. So APIs act as a good channel for doing such, providing value to your consumers or customers, I would say.
Nice.
So and the rest,
where were we?
yeah. Sorry, I was just going to recap. So you've got monitors. So I'm not going to spend much time on this. I think everyone's here to see how we can build an API. I think the last one is just history. So it just captures everything that you've done under this Postman environment and this workspace itself. So as I said, I'm going to build an API, and this API is going to retrieve details about cocktails out there, because that's what I just want to do right now because it's nice. You can basically
because
see
we're having a
list
good
of cocktails,
time.
telling you it's good vibes. So one, I usually go to a service called Rapid API. So I recommend you have this. It's a free service, so you don't have to pay for it, but there's a caveat. So I think you can access up to, I think, about 100 calls on the free plan. If you want to go above that, then you need to obviously pay. But I think it's about $1 or $3 per month, which is relatively cheap, I would say. But essentially, if you want to test and play around with the APIs, this is a good source of information to actually go into. When you go to this, I'm going to duplicate this because this is one I want to use, but I just want to just briefly show you exactly what Rapid API offers you. So if I go back here, so you can clearly see it gives you APIs from different industries. So you got sports, finance, travel, entertainment, location, every single thing out here. You can basically just delve into it and see what you can get. So each API is responsible for doing certain things. For example, you got like the vaccine, COVID. For example, you can just see information about live COVID vaccine centers, which is quite helpful, I would say. But essentially, it's just a library of like APIs, and you can do so many things with this this marketplace, I would say. So if you're interested in any API, you just click into the category, and it breaks it down into different sections. For example, you can get an API to see currencies. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with crypto. I'm sure everyone. But if you want to see the prices, you can interact with this. Cool stuff. So going back to our APIs, cocktail, I want to see cocktails. So here you can see this is just an information about cocktails. I'm not going to confuse you with this, but I'm just going to point out the key aspects you need to copy and paste in Postman to be able to wake up the APIs itself.
All right, so let's recap the first step you've done. So you went to rapidapi.com, and then how did you get this cocktail? All right, view.
Okay, so if I duplicate this now and you go back.
Just to give a step by step.
Yep. So I went to food for myself, as you know, a foodie. Click that. Then I just looked at any API I wanted, and I saw the cocktail one was kind of very interesting. So I just clicked on that. And then that took me to Cocktail DB, which is essentially where we're here now.
Awesome.
Great. So I'm just going to close this off. Anyway. Does that answer the question?
No, that's all. Just saying thanks.
Right. No worries. I think it's quite useful to recap and just get everyone following along. It'd be nice, obviously, questions or like if people can chat.
Don't shy out, people. Just drop your questions in the chat.
Yeah, fantastic. So you see this very scary looking area, but I promise you it's not scary. So what this tells you is it gives you the different endpoints you can access from this API service itself. So this cocktail is an API service. I think it was developed by this person. I don't know who was developing APIs for cocktails, but apparently he's a very passionate person. So here you got like different endpoints. So these are like different calls that you can run based on the desired outcome you want to get, for example. So if I wanted to get a cocktail by the name, I can basically use this. If I want to get it by ingredient, I can use this API call. If I wanted to filter after retrieving the information, filter by category, I can use this call. So it's up to you to design what you want to get by choosing the correct API or the appropriate API, I would say.
We do have a question from Antoine. All these APIs are free?
Oh yeah, good question. So yes, they are free to test, as I mentioned. So I think you have up to, if I'm not mistaken, 100 calls on the free plan. And then if you have to go above 100 calls per month, I think you need to pay, I think about $3 or so. I think you can clearly see here, all you need to do is just subscribe. So if I manage my subscription, for example, or let me show you exactly a new one, and I'll show you how to subscribe and show you that it's actually free. So if I go back home here and I go to another service, so food, I'll just say this one. So you can subscribe to tests. If you look at pricing here, you can see, yeah, oh, it's even more, to be honest. So free plan, it's a basic $0 per month, 500 requests per month. So you can just play around with the APIs itself. But if you need to go above that, up to 10,000, then you need to pay $10. I think it's gone higher. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it's great to see a little cluster of no-coders from France. Hi, Patrice.
Nice. Patrice Evra?
No. And I think I also saw Rachel, not from France, but yeah. Yeah, you're back.
Oh, okay. There you go. I think I froze for a bit, but it's all good now?
Yeah, all good, all good.
Fantastic. I think the code is affecting the Wi-Fi in the UK, so reporting live from the UK. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, using this API, I'm going to set this API up in Postman. I'll run it so you see the result itself, and then this information. So I'm just going ahead to design it so we're not wasting time designing this information here. But I'll show you the end result as we progress. So first things first, as you would see, APIs can be accessible via different types of languages, right? It depends on what language you're working with, and that will be determined by either your organization or your experience, I would say. For me, I am only familiar with the coil because the Bubble as a service works with the coil method, and I'll show you why. So to get the coil, you go to shell. So shell is where you can get the coil method. So there's a C URL, I call it coil, and then click that. So that allows you to interact via the URL itself and has a different structure of creating the APIs itself. So here, I basically just need to provide 3 pieces of information to Postman to actually get this value that I want. And we're going to be getting the value of vodka. So I want to see every single thing about vodka. So what I'll do is I'll copy this URL, which is the first point. And I'll go to Postman. Now, Postman, to create a new API, you can either go to this section here, click create new API, and that will create it there, and you name your API. Or you can just click this plus sign, which is a lot faster, to be honest. Now, right, I'll first name this request. I think it's very good to name your request.
Yeah, good naming conventions are always good.
Yeah. Oh, one second.
We have a really good question, but I'll keep it for later. So I'll let you finish up with this first.
Oh, okay, great one. So here you see that this has a list of methods. So a method is basically a way you can retrieve information, or sorry, I'll recap. A method is a way you interact with a third-party service. So a get method would always be you trying to retrieve records from the third-party service and using it in your own service. A post is when you're trying to pass information to the third-party service and asking it to do something. For example, if a customer cancels their plan with you and you are using Stripe as a service, you would immediately want to ping an update to Stripe to say, hey, this customer is canceled from your Bubble application or whatever application you use. And then that will automatically update their status in Stripe as well as in your database itself. So that going forward, you're no longer charging that customer. So put and patch are almost the same thing. So the only difference is a put method allows you to basically update a specific item within a record. So for example, you have a user record, and you have a user's email, their phone number, and their I'll say their address. If you wanted to update the email address only, you can use a put, and that will just go to the service and just update the email address without having to reload every single record about that specific user. So I like to use put because it's more efficient and does the job for you. Whereas a patch does similar thing, but goes to the third-party service and just updates the whole thing, but actions your request, which is updating just the email address, which in my view is not really efficient. And then you've got loads of newer ones, which I'm going to be honest, I've not interacted with. So I think I've done the delete, I've done copy. I think that's basically up to where I've done. So, I mean, I'll be quite interested to interact with these ones, but this is the beauty of Postman. So not every service out there will give you a rich list of methods to connect with APIs. And frankly speaking, not every third-party service will basically provide a means for you to like use one of these methods. So I don't think I've come across any third-party service, for example, that allows you to unlink. But if you do, Postman gives you the chance to kind of test it and see how it operates, basically. And that's the beauty of Postman. Compare this to Bubble itself, which I'll talk about shortly. And I'll show you how limited Bubble is in terms of building or constructing APIs. So
that's controversial. We have Bubble lovers in here, so very keen to see all the limitations.
I'm happy to take any technical questions, but that's the truth. That's the gospel truth. Bubble still has I won't say a long way, but they still need to make some improvements in terms of their APIs. The API connector, which is the plugin you use to connect. So I'm going to paste it feels like a long time I copied that URL. So I'm going to paste that here. And then I'm going to go back to the documentation here, which is the rapid API one. So here it's saying the second piece of information I want you to provide is the header. So the header is a kind of like a parameter, which can be found in as the name says, the header, which contains information, like unique information about the API. So it's another form of authenticating the API itself, because authentication kind of covers a lot of things. So it covers the token itself. The token is the password, and it also covers some certain parameters that are specific to the API itself. So a header is where you'd obviously place that parameter. In some cases, you place the content type of the API in the header. What that simply means is what response type is this API going to be in? Is it going to be a JSON format? I'm getting too technical now, but I just want to just explain. Is it a JSON format? Is it in a plain text? Is it in XML format? This is where you define the header. But I'm not going to go too technical into this. I'm happy to set up another session to talk about the different formats, because it's a very long session.
We'll get the feedback after today, and then I'll let you know.
Fantastic. So here I'm just going to copy this key. So this is what we call a key. So think of it as a label. So if you're creating a sign-up form, you put a label called first name, and then you have your inputs. And that input is where the user places their first name. So this is my label in the API itself. So I'll go here and I'll place it in here. Sorry, in the header. So we have the header section. I'll place it as a key. And then I'll place the value of that key in here. And I'll do the same thing for the second parameter. Please know that this differs for every service. So every service has their own way of connecting things. So they can provide you with just one single information that is in the header. Some may not even require it, I would say. And I'll paste that here. So this is a key that allows you to talk to this API successfully. if you're a document freak like me, I like to add descriptions to my every single thing I do. So just making sure that I immediately know what that is, because I might tend to just create something and 5 minutes later I've forgotten what I've done. So for time's sake, I'm not going to do that. But it's always good practice to, add labels or describe things as you progress in whatever you do, whether Postman or in Bubble or in any web application that you use. So we've provided the URL, we've provided the header, we've provided the second header parameter. We're all good to go because those are all of the information that we need to provide to this API service to retrieve or interact with this specific API. So here I'll just click send. There we go. So send a request.
I was hoping for something prettier than that. So I was like, oh yeah, now it's the good part. Now it's more writing.
Like images of the drinks itself, but yeah, it is what it is, I would say. So this just provides you with a list of drinks, and you can see different parameters. For example, the ID, the drink name, long vodka. I'd like to try long vodka very soon. And then video. So for example, if there's a video about the vodka, maybe that's where you can place the link to. Category. So this is well talking about filtering by category. So it's an ordinary drink if you wanted to categorize it. And then just instructions. So it tells you how to make it, which is great. I mean, someone who works in the bar can create a very simple app about this
That's
API.
amazing. You can connect this to like any visual interface, right?
Yep.
To create to make it prettier.
Yep. Or you can add this to the Nocoder Ops newsletter every Thursday, how to make drinks newsletter.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll tell, we can tell Jens when he joins us later on.
Yeah, fantastic.
We do have a question about Postman in the chat by Courtney Baker. Hi, Courtney. So would you recommend setting your API key as a variable within Postman?
Good question. Yes, I would highly recommend that for two reasons. One, for consistency, and two, for repeatability. So if you want to easily use your keys on thousands of APIs, you do not want to be setting that individually. So a variable would allow you automatically use those keys in every API that you create every single time.
And then I saved this question for the end because it was really interesting. And so by our friend David, recently I worked with an API that had very limited documentation. One of the items they failed to document was how to paginate the calls. I have figured that one out, but I often see questions about pagination. You showed us how to make a call. Would you be able to show us how to call another request page when results are limited? Boom.
Oh, good question. So that's a very good scenario, and I don't think I have actually come across that scenario. So when you say pagination, right, you want to structure your responses in a page format. So for example, page 1, just show me only 10 records. Page 2, show me the next 10 records. I imagine that's what you mean. David, you just maybe confirm? But I think I can take this question away. I think it's just something I'll definitely want to look into because I've not actually dealt with paginating the APIs itself because, there we go. Airtable used to show only
Airtable used to only show 100 records at a time.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I think this is something I've actually come across in the past before. I guess. I think it's good practice to obviously paginate your APIs. I think it has to do with their rate limit itself. So they do manage the rate limit, so therefore they can show you how many records per time. I guess if you want to go above 50 records, that's very unique. So I'm not going to give you the wrong answer today or demonstrate something that I'm not fully aware of. So I'm happy to take that away. David, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be quite interested to see this use case.
Yeah, 100%. We'll get back to you. Or if you're in our Discord, we will probably talk about it. So if you want to return 51 items, you have to make 2 calls. Yeah.
Yeah, so the way I've handled, I'll say the way I've handled is, if I understand what you're saying, is via my web app like Bubble. So Bubble would usually have like a reloop. So you have a loop in action where you kind of loop the calls itself, okay? And when you want to get more records, you just basically ping this on a recurring basis, which is essentially what you're saying, right? So to make 2 calls, you get 51 items. So again, like I said, it's quite interesting use case. So I'll be quite interested to obviously discuss this with you, see how that could work. Maybe something that we can make a video and share with the community afterwards.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
All
David,
right.
please reach out to me. Let's make something. Let's make magic and share with the community.
Awesome. Right. So that's how you generate a cocktail list full of good recipes, and how you get an APIs and kind of create your own and pull in things from all over the place. You even have a marketplace where you can play around with things. So one of the advice that I always give people is just like, it can be intimidating, it can be scary, but just get your hands dirty, just try it out, and then you will learn a lot iterating, right? And so if you're in a community, if you're involved into the space, it's much faster to just like try it out and then ask around. There's so many people out there, like the amazing Stanley here today, giving their precious time and very happy to share their knowledge and valuable insights, just like what you've done today with us today, Stanley.
Yeah, really excited and happy with sharing this knowledge. I'll say I don't think I'm very amazing. I'm just a normal guy. But yeah, thanks for the good words anyways. But yeah, I'm really interested in David's use case. So please reach out to me so we can create something.
Yeah, I'll share your LinkedIn in the chat.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else for us?
Not really. In the interest of time, I was just gonna show a very pretty much the same process but in Bubble. So you just the name, basically, that's it. So you're just going to replicate the same setup in Bubble because we validated that it works in Postman, and then you do whatever you want to do in Bubble, displaying it however you want to display this in Bubble.
Antoine is saying his hands are not dirty enough. Well, come and get them dirty in the community. We do a lot of fun stuff in there.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. All right, let me pull the stream, the screen actually out of the way so that we can focus on you once again. Thank you ever so much for being here with us today. It has been an amazing talk. I hope people appreciated it because, documentation is kind of boring. I mean, it's boring to me, right? And so having somebody like you just come in here and walking us through the steps and what a good documentation is, I think is very valuable. And so I know for a fact that if I had to research this by myself, not a chance. But that's why we love community, and that's why we have so many great people around that are, happy to share their knowledge and experience like you, Stanley.
Yeah, really excited, and thank you for having me.
Of course. And just before we wrap up, I know that we're a couple minutes over the hour, but I'm just gonna pull or fork, do I say fork, my Jens back on the screen.
Luckily, I was ready for that.
I saw you.
I've been following along in the background, so thank you so much, Stan, for that. I just want to do a quick plug for our API bootcamp. You will get an email. Everyone who signed up will get an email with the recording for this this event, and also a link to our bootcamp. We're doing a 3-week bootcamp together with a really good agency called 9X in March. If you are working with a company and you think that this bootcamp can help you in your work, we've even prepared an email for you to send to your boss, explaining to him or her why this is such a good investment. You'll find the bootcamp on nocodeops.com/API bootcamp. We will send it out to you after the event as well.
Awesome. And we promise that the email is not made with ChatGPT.
We can't promise that. We can't promise that.
All right. I won't say anything there. I'm just going to share the link here because I actually found it as well. So I'm just going to put it in the chat just in case. Great walkthrough. I can't wait to help the no-code world make this simpler. Thank you so much for following along, Stuart and Patrice. Merci, Claudia and Stan. You rock. I don't know how to say you're welcome in French, but très bien. And so I guess, Stanley, that's all from us.
Yeah.
And amazing to have you here. Once again, great to have you in the community. You're such a valuable member at Nocoder Ops. And so, just stick around for more goodies coming up. I think next week, Jens, we're going to have another kind of niche API event.
For the next
Thursday
week, that is correct. Kind of
amazing. Because basically what we're doing, we're treating APIs as our theme for the month, but then we're going deep and deep. Every week we're going into specific topics that have to do with API, like today. So thank you so much. And yes, so next week I think we have something to do with resources, all the resources that are available out there, and how you can use those resources for your own use cases. All right. Well, you all take care. Have a fantastic weekend. Use one of the cocktail recipes that you can create with your APIs. And I'll see you next week.
All right. Bye all. Have a nice evening.
Bye everyone.